On a faraway planet under 2 suns and 3 moons, a child was born. Her people called themselves the Vayari. Tall and graceful beings with shining silver skin and bright crystal eyes, every child of the Vayari was seen as a blessing. But when this little girl came into the world, silence fell across the chamber. Her skin was dark, almost black like the shadows of night. Her eyes glowed faintly red instead of crystal blue. The elders stared at her with fear. The healers whispered that something was wrong. "She is not like us," they muttered. "She is cursed." Her mother wept, holding the small baby close, but even her father looked away, his face heavy with doubt. From the first day of her life, she was marked. Other children would not play with her. When she walked through the village, people turned their faces. Whispers followed her like ghosts. "Monster," they said under their breath. "Curse," they hissed as she passed. The girl grew older, but loneliness was her only friend. She watched the others laugh and dance, but no one invited her. At night, she sat by the edge of the forest, staring at the stars. She wondered why she was born so different. Why had the universe given her this form, this face, this strange red light in her eyes? Her parents tried to protect her, but the pressure of the village grew stronger. Her father spoke less and less to her. Ashamed of the looks from others, her mother still hugged her, still whispered love. But even she feared the anger of the elders. Every day, the council of the Vayari argued about the child. "Her presence brings danger," one elder said. "If she stays, our crops will fail, our waters will dry. She carries darkness in her blood," another cried. "We cannot keep her among us." The little girl listened to their words from the shadows, her heart breaking each time. She wanted to scream, to shout, "I am not a curse, I am just a child." But no one would believe her. The world around her was filled with fear, and fear is stronger than truth. One night the decision was made. The council gathered beneath the light of the twin suns. The people filled the square, waiting to hear their judgment. The head elder raised his staff, his voice heavy and final. "This child is no daughter of Vayari, she is a monster. She will bring ruin if she stays. From this night, she is cast out." Gasps filled the crowd. Some people nodded in agreement. Others looked away in guilt. The girl's mother fell to her knees begging for mercy, but no one listened. Her father stood frozen, silent, unable to protect her. The girl looked at their faces, saw fear in every eye, and she understood she was no longer welcome. The guards led her to the edge of the forest, their hands gripping her arms roughly. They did not look at her, as if touching her was shame enough. She wanted to cry, but no tears came. Her heart was too heavy. The forest stretched before her, dark and endless, filled with unknown dangers. Behind her, the only home she had ever known, closed its doors forever. The guards pushed her forward and turned back, leaving her alone. The night air was cold, and the strange sounds of the forest echoed around her. She wrapped her arms around herself, whispering, "I am not a monster," though no one was there to hear. Her stomach was empty, her feet were weak, but she walked deeper into the trees. Every branch that cracked under her step sounded like a warning. Every howl in the distance made her shiver. As the moons rose higher, she found a small clearing and sat on the ground. She looked up at the stars, the same stars she had always watched from the village edge. But now they felt different. Now they looked colder. She wondered if the stars also thought she was a monster, or if they saw her as just a lonely child. The forest was alive with whispers. The wind howled through the branches. Her eyes glowed faint red in the shadows, giving her face an eerie shine. She hugged her knees tighter, trying to hide that glow, as if hiding it could erase her pain. Sleep would not come. Fear kept her awake, and hunger bit into her stomach. Then deep in the night a sound came. Not the call of an animal, not the rustle of leaves, but something strange. It was sharp, mechanical, unlike anything she had ever heard before. She froze, her red eyes wide, listening. Step by step, the sound grew closer. Heavy footsteps unlike those of her people. Her heart raced, fear gripping her once again. But somewhere deep inside, a spark of curiosity rose too. She whispered to herself, "What is that?" The sound grew louder, and in the shadows between the trees, she saw a shape moving, not tall and silver like the Veyari, but shorter, broader, wrapped in strange clothing. The alien child held her breath. She thought she'd been thrown away to die, but now she wondered, perhaps the universe had not abandoned her. Perhaps something, or someone, had come. The girl sat frozen in the clearing, her glowing red eyes locked on the moving shadow. The sound of heavy footsteps grew louder, crunching the fallen leaves underfoot. It was not like the soft and graceful steps of the Veyari. It was heavier, rougher, more deliberate. Her heart thumped hard in her chest. Her breath shallow, every part of her wanted to run, but her legs refused to move. Then from the trees it appeared. The figure was shorter than the Veyari, but broader, wrapped in strange coverings of cloth and metal. Its face was hidden under a clear shield, glowing faintly with light. In its hands it carried a long stick with blinking lights, some kind of tool, or maybe a weapon. The girl's eyes widened. She had never seen such a creature. The figure paused, noticing her. It raised one hand slowly, palm open, a gesture of peace. The girl flinched, expecting an attack, but no strike came. Instead, the creature lowered its tool and took a careful step forward. A soft sound came from inside the helmet, words in a language she could not understand. The voice was gentle, not sharp, not cruel. She tilted her head, confused, her fear mixing with curiosity. The creature reached into a pouch and pulled something out. It was a small square object, wrapped in bright colors. With slow movements, it unwrapped it, revealing food. The smell was strange but warm. The creature broke the food in half and placed one piece on the ground. Then it pointed at the piece and stepped back. The girl stared, unsure. Was this a trick, a trap? Her stomach growled, hunger twisting inside her. She moved closer, sniffing, then quickly grabbed the food and bit into it. The taste was unlike anything she had ever known. Salty, soft, filling. She ate fast, afraid it might vanish. The creature laughed softly, the sound warm and kind. For the first time in her life, the child felt no fear from another being. This stranger looked at her not with disgust, not with hatred, but with something else, something she could not name yet. It was not the way her people looked at her. It was something closer to kindness. The creature pointed to its chest and spoke slowly. Human. Then it pointed to her, waiting. She hesitated, then whispered her name, a sound soft and broken. The human repeated it clumsily, almost correctly. The girl's eyes widened. No one had ever spoken her name without anger or fear. She felt a strange warmth inside. The human sat on a rock and began drawing shapes in the dirt, a circle, a star, a line. Then he pointed at the sky, at the twin moons above, and drew them again. She watched carefully, then took a stick and drew her own sign, a mark her people used for home. The human looked at it and nodded, smiling. Even without words, they began to understand each other. The night grew deeper, and the forest around them echoed with strange calls. The girl looked around nervously, but the human raised his tool and pressed a button. A light appeared, bright and steady, chasing away the shadows. She gasped softly. Amazed, never had she seen such power, to command light with a touch. To her people, only the elders carried fire, and even that was weak and fading. This human carried light as if it was nothing. Hours passed, and the child felt something she had never felt before. Safety. She lay on the ground near the human, her eyes half closing. For the first time she believed she might not be alone anymore, but far away, hidden beyond the trees, eyes were watching. Her people, the Veyari hunters, had followed her trail. They had seen the strange light in the forest. They whispered to each other, fear and anger rising. This creature she has found is dangerous, one said. It corrupts her even more, another hissed. They tightened their grips on their weapons, waiting for the right moment. The girl stirred, sensing something. Her red eyes glowed faintly as she sat up. She turned her head toward the darkness. She did not see them, but she felt their hatred. Her heart beat faster. She looked at the human, who was checking his strange device, unaware of the danger. Should she tell him, should she warn him, or would he abandon her if he knew her people hunted her? The human noticed her fear and tilted his head. He pointed at her heart, then at himself, then made the gesture again. She did not fully understand, but she felt the meaning. I will protect you. Her throat tightened. No one had ever promised her that before. Her own parents had failed, her people had betrayed her, but this human, this stranger, had given her food, light, and now a promise. Still, the shadows in the forest moved closer. The hunters were ready. The girl did not know it yet, but her life was about to change forever. For the first time, she had found kindness, and for the first time, she would have to fight to keep it. Her throat tightened. No one had ever promised her that before. Her own parents had failed, her people had betrayed her. But this human, this stranger, had given her food, light, and now a promise. Still, the shadows in the forest moved closer. The hunters were ready. The girl did not know it yet, but her life was about to change forever. For the first time, she had found kindness, and for the first time, she would have to fight to keep it. The forest woke with the sound of morning, the twin suns rising slowly and painting the trees in gold. The alien child sat near the human, watching him move with steady hands. He was repairing a strange device, wires and glowing crystals scattered on the ground. Every so often he looked up, smiled at her, and returned to his work. The girl hugged her knees, silent but curious. She had never stayed beside another being for so long without feeling fear. With her people, every glance carried hatred. With the human, every glance carried something gentler. He spoke words she did not understand, but his tone was calm, patient, kind. Sometimes he would point at something, say its name, then wait for her to repeat it. She stumbled over the sounds, but he nodded with approval every time. When she pointed at the sky and whispered her own word for star, he tried to repeat it too. His voice was strange, rougher than the Ve'ari, but hearing her language from his mouth made her chest feel warm. Together, they began to share small lessons. She learned that the human's name was Daniel, a name she repeated softly until it felt safe on her tongue. Daniel learned her name too, saying it slowly, carefully, as if it was precious. For the first time, her name no longer felt like a curse, but like a song. Daniel gave her food again, softer, sweeter. This time she laughed for the first time when the taste surprised her. The sound startled her. She had never heard herself laugh before. Daniel's eyes brightened and he laughed too. The forest around them seemed lighter, less cruel. As the suns climbed higher, Daniel stood and gestured for her to follow. He walked, with strong steps, and she followed, hesitant at first, then quicker. They crossed streams, climbed small hills, and wandered through the tall grass. When she slipped, he held out his hand, waiting until she took it. Her people had always pulled away from her touch, but he did not. His hand was warm, steady, and it made her believe for just a moment that she was not untouchable. At midday, they reached a fallen tree, wide and hollow. Daniel tapped the wood, testing it, then nodded as if satisfied. He pulled out cloth and strange tools from his pack, building a small shelter. The girl watched, closely amazed at how quickly he shaped things with his hands. Her people only relied on old traditions and simple huts. Daniel made something strong in only a short time. She thought to herself, humans are small, but they build like giants. They rested inside, and Daniel pulled out a small glowing box, lit up with moving shapes, images of other humans, families, cities, oceans of blue water, unlike anything she had ever seen. She leaned closer, eyes wide, her breath caught in wonder. Daniel watched her reaction, his expression soft. He seemed to understand that for her, this was magic. But then the box beeped, a sharp sound that made both of them freeze. Daniel frowned, touching buttons quickly. The girl tilted her head, sensing his worry. He spoke in his language, fast, urgent, though she could not understand the words. Still, she understood his eyes. Something was coming. Something dangerous. The box had sent a signal, a call into the eye. Stars. She did not know if it was friend or foe, but Daniel looked uneasy, and that was enough. They stayed quiet for a long time, listening to the forest. Birds chirped, Leaves rustled, but under it all, there was tension. The girl's red eyes glowed faintly in the dim shelter. Reflecting her unease, Daniel noticed and placed a hand on his chest again, repeating the gesture from before. He pointed at her, then back at himself, then drew a line between them in the dirt. She realized the meaning. Together. Her heart swelled with something she had never felt before. Trust. It was fragile, like a flame in the wind, but it burned bright inside her. As the suns began to fall, Daniel started a small fire with his strange tools. The flames danced, warm and alive. She had always sat apart from fires in her village, never welcomed near them, but now she sat close beside Daniel, feeling the heat on her face. The shadows seemed less frightening, the forest less hostile, yet deep within those shadows, the hunters still watched. They whispered of betrayal, of the cursed child bonding with the outsider. Their anger grew, but they did not attack yet. They wanted the right moment, the perfect strike. The girl did not know of their presence, but she felt the forest watching her. Her skin prickled, her instincts warning her. As night fell, Daniel lay down, closing his eyes with calm trust. The girl stayed awake longer, staring at the stars. She wondered if kindness like his could last, or if it would vanish like a dream. Her heart wanted to believe, but fear whispered in her mind. Still, when sleep finally took her, she did not dream of being a monster. She dreamed of being seen, of being accepted, of being more than her curse. In the distance, beyond the forest and the hills, engines roared in the sky. A ship was approaching, drawn by the signal Daniel had sent. The future was coming fast, and neither the alien child nor the human knew how much their bond would be tested. The night sky burned with fire. Engines roared above the forest, shaking the ground and scattering the birds. The alien child sat up quickly, her red eyes glowing, brighter in fear. Daniel was already awake, his strange device flashing warning lights. He looked at the sky, then at her, his face hard and serious. From between the trees, the light of torches appeared. The Vayari hunters had arrived, their tall, silver bodies moving like shadows, their crystal eyes cold and sharp. They carried long spears that glowed faintly, weapons meant to strike fear as much as to kill. The girl's heart pounded. She knew these were her people, yet they did not come for her safety. They came for her death. Daniel stepped forward, placing himself between her and the hunters. He raised his hand as he had done before, palm open, a gesture of peace, but the hunters did not stop. Their leader shouted in the Vayari tongue, his voice sharp like a blade. "She is a curse, and you are her poison. Step aside, human, or you will share her fate." The girl flinched at the words, old wounds tearing open again. Her chest ached as if each syllable was a spear. Daniel looked back at her, confusion in his eyes, but he understood enough. He shook his head firmly, refusing to move. He spread his arms wide, shielding her completely. The hunters paused, surprised by his defiance. No one had ever protected her before, not even her father. Tears pricked her eyes, though she quickly wiped them away. Above them, the roar of engines grew louder. A ship was descending, breaking through the clouds like a fiery star. The hunters looked up, uneasy. Daniel glanced at his device, then at the sky. He knew the ship was not Vayari. It was something else, something far more dangerous. He grabbed the girl's hand and pulled her behind the fallen tree. She stumbled but followed, fear and trust clashing inside her. The ship landed with a crash. In the clearing, its metal body gleamed under the twin moons, lights blinking across its surface. A ramp lowered, and from the smoke emerged figures in dark armor. Not Vayari, not human, something unknown. Their helmets glowed red, and their weapons crackled with energy. The hunters hissed in fear, but pride kept them rooted. The girl trembled, clutching Daniel's arm. She whispered, "Who are they?" Daniel did not answer. His face grim, his eyes locked on the armored intruders. The leader of the hunters stepped forward, raising his spear. "This is our land, leave now," he declared. But the armored figures only laughed. A cold metallic sound. One raised a weapon and fired, a bolt of energy striking the ground at the hunter's feet. The earth shook. The grass burned. The hunters staggered back, fear in their eyes. The message was clear. This was no negotiation. Daniel pulled out his own tool, a smaller weapon he had hidden. He pressed a button and it hummed with light. The girl's eyes widened. She had not known he carried such power, but even with it they were outnumbered. The armored intruders spread out, surrounding the clearing. The hunters looked at the girl, hatred and fear mixing with desperation. "This is your fault," one shouted. "Your curse has brought them here." The words cut deep, but Daniel stepped forward, shouting something in his own tongue. His voice was strong, defiant. He pointed at the girl, then at the hunters, then at the intruders. His meaning was clear, even without translation. "She is. Not the curse, the danger is them." The hunters hesitated, their pride clashing with their fear. The intruders raised their weapons again, preparing to strike. Daniel stood tall, unflinching. The girl's hands shook, but inside her something stirred, a warmth deep in her chest, a fire she had always feared. Her people had called it a curse, but now, facing death, it felt like something else, something waiting to awaken. The first shot was fired. Energy ripped through the clearing, lighting the trees with fire. The hunters scattered, some attacking, some fleeing. Daniel grabbed the girl and pulled her behind cover, his weapon sparking as he returned fire. The girl pressed her hands to her ears, the sounds too loud, too violent. But then she saw Daniel fall to one knee. His shoulder burned from a blast. Her heart screamed inside her, a soundless cry. She could not lose him, not the only being who had shown her kindness. Her red eyes blazed brighter than ever before. The warmth in her chest exploded into light. Flames of crimson energy burst from her hands. The ground shook, the air crackled. The intruders staggered back in shock. The hunters froze, staring at her with horror and awe. The girl rose to her feet, the energy swirling around her like wings. She did not understand how, but the power obeyed her, and for the first time she was not afraid of it. Daniel looked up at her, pain in his eyes, but also wonder. He whispered a single word. "Beautiful." Her throat tightened, tears mixed with fire, all. Her life she had been told she was a monster, but in his eyes she was something else, something worth protecting. The intruders regrouped, their weapons glowing brighter. The hunters slowly gathered too, torn between fear and survival. The girl stood at the center of it all, crimson flames lighting the clearing. For the first time, she was not hiding. For the first time, she was ready to fight. The clearing burned with fire and light. The alien child stood at the center, her red eyes glowing like living embers, her hands alive with crimson energy. The armored intruders tightened their grip on their weapons, their glowing helmets turning toward her. The Vayari hunters froze, torn between fear and disbelief. All their lives they had called her a curse, a monster, yet now they watched as her power shielded them from a greater threat. Daniel knelt behind the fallen tree, clutching his wounded shoulder. Pain burned through him, but his eyes never left the girl. He had seen her frightened, broken, cast aside. Now he saw her standing tall, fire swirling around her like a crown. She looked like a force born from the stars. The intruders fired, beams of blue light streaking through the air. The girl raised her hands without thinking, and the crimson flame surged outward. The blast struck the wall of energy and shattered into sparks. The forest shook, the ground cracked, but she did not fall. The hunters gasped, their whispers sharp and frantic. "She commands the curse," one hissed. "No," another whispered, trembling. "She commands something greater." Daniel struggled to his feet, his weapon humming with light. He shouted in his rough human voice, pointing at the girl and then at the intruders. His meaning was clear even without words. "She is our strength." The girl turned, her eyes meeting his. For a moment, fear wavered in her chest, the old voices of her people echoing inside. Monster, curse, bringer of ruin. But then she saw Daniel, his face filled with trust, not fear. His belief was stronger than all their hatred, her power pulsed brighter. The intruders charged, their armored boots pounding the ground. The girl leapt forward, energy bursting from her hands, crimson fire wrapped around her arms like blades. She struck the first soldier, and his armor cracked under the force. Another swung his weapon, but Daniel fired his tool. Hitting the soldier's side, the two fought together, one with human courage, one with alien power. The hunters watched, torn between shame and awe. Their leader shouted, "Do not stand idle, fight!" Some obeyed, rushing into battle with their spears. Others hung back, unable to accept what they saw. But slowly the truth began to sink in. The child they had cast out, the child they had called cursed, was fighting for them, not against them. The battle raged, fire and light clashing in the clearing. The girl felt her strength growing, not from anger but from purpose. For the first time she was not fighting to prove she belonged. She was fighting because someone had believed in her, because Daniel's kindness had shown her she was more than a curse. That belief burned brighter than her flames. The intruders regrouped, forming a line, their weapons glowing with deadly energy. Daniel staggered beside her, sweat on his brow, blood staining his sleeve. He looked at her with steady eyes. "You can do this," he whispered. Even though she did not understand the words, she felt them all the same. The intruders fired together, a storm of blue energy. The girl raised both hands, her body trembling. The crimson flames swirled into a shield, a blazing wall that caught every blast. The ground split, the trees shook, the hunters cried out in shock. But the shield held. When the storm ended, she lowered her arms, panting, her eyes burning like twin suns. The intruders hesitated for the first time. The leader of the hunters stepped forward, his voice shaking. "Perhaps she is not a curse," he said slowly. "Perhaps she is our protector." The words spread like fire among the others. Whispers turned to shouts. Doubt turned to courage. For the first time, her people looked at her not with fear, but with hope. The girl's chest tightened. She had dreamed of this moment, but never believed it possible. Her eyes glistened, but she did not falter. She turned back to the intruders, her flames rising higher. Daniel stood beside her, lifting his weapon despite his wound. Together they faced the enemy, human and alien, two outcasts standing as one. With a cry that shook the forest, the girl unleashed her power. Crimson fire surged across the clearing, a wave of light and heat. The intruders stumbled, their armor cracking, their formation breaking. The hunters charged with renewed strength, their spears glowing as they struck. The battle turned, the tide shifted. One by one, the armored intruders fell back, their weapons failing against the storm of resistance. The leader hissed in anger, firing a final blast toward the girl. Daniel leapt forward, shielding her with his body. The blast struck his weapon instead, shattering it in his hands. Smoke and sparks filled the air. The girl cried out, her flames roaring brighter with one last strike. She hurled a storm of crimson light that shook the ground. The intruders stumbled into their ship, retreating, their engines flaring. In moments, the ship lifted, roaring into the night sky, vanishing among the stars. Silence fell over the clearing. The hunters stood breathing hard, their spears lowered. They turned their eyes to the girl, no longer filled with hatred. Instead, they looked at her as if seeing her for the first time. Daniel leaned against the broken tree, his chest rising and falling. With exhaustion, he looked at her with a faint smile, his lips moving around one word: strong. She felt her throat tighten, tears mixing with fire. For the first time in her life, she did not feel cursed. She felt alive. She felt needed. She felt believed. The forest was quiet after the battle. Smoke drifted above the broken clearing, and the ground still glowed faintly where fire and energy had struck. The intruders were gone, their ship nothing more than a shadow in the sky, but the air remained heavy, filled with the weight of what had just happened. The alien child stood, trembling, crimson flames fading slowly from her hands. Her chest rose and fell in sharp breaths, her red eyes dimming as exhaustion crept in. She had unleashed a power she had always feared, a power her people had cursed, yet instead of ruin, it had saved them all. Daniel limped toward her, his face pale from blood loss. He leaned on a broken branch like a cane, but his eyes held steady light. When he reached her, he smiled softly, lifting one hand to her shoulder. "You did it," he whispered, though she could not understand the words. She understood his gaze, though. It was not fear, not disgust, not the hatred she had seen all her life. It was pride. The hunters gathered in a circle, their silver bodies shining under the twin moons. Their leader stepped forward, his voice shaking as he spoke. "For years we called you cursed," he said slowly. "We cast you out. We named you monster." The words cut deep, each one reminding her of nights spent alone, of tears cried in silence, but then his tone changed, softer, uncertain. "Yet tonight it was your so-called curse that saved us," the crowd murmured, some in agreement, some in doubt. One hunter shouted, "She is still dangerous." Another countered, "Without her we would all be dead." Voices clashed, fear wrestling with truth. The girl lowered her head, afraid to look at them even after saving their lives. Would she still be nothing more than a shadow to them? Daniel stepped forward, his wounded body swaying but his voice firm. He pointed at the girl, then at the hunters, then struck his chest with his hand. His words came rough and strong. "Not monster." The hunters stared at him, confused, but they understood the meaning. He stood before them like a shield, the same way he had done when they first arrived. He refused to let them call her a curse again. The girl's throat tightened, warmth rising in her chest. This human, this stranger from another world, was the first being to fight for her. She felt tears burn her eyes, but she did not look away. For once she wanted to stand tall, not shrink in shame. She lifted her head, her glowing eyes meeting the crowd. "I am not a monster," she said, her voice trembling but clear. Some hunters gasped, others lowered their weapons slowly. Her words carried the weight of every lonely night, every cruel whisper, every wound she had carried in silence. And now, for the first time, she dared to speak them aloud. The leader of the hunters looked at her, then at Daniel. His expression was heavy with doubt, but also something new. Uncertainty. He turned to the others, his voice low. "If we kill her, we kill our only hope," the crowd murmured again, the fear that had bound them for years slowly breaking. But not everyone was ready to change. One elder stepped forward, his eyes burning with anger. "This is a trick," he hissed. "Her power will destroy us. The human blinds us with lies." He raised his spear, pointing it at the girl. "She must die here and now." The girl froze, her heart pounding. Daniel moved instantly, standing in front of her again, his weapon broken but his stance unshaken. He spread his arms wide, as if daring them to strike him first. The elder snarled, anger twisting his face. The hunters around him hesitated, their grips loosening on their spears. For the first time they questioned the words of fear. The elder shouted again, his voice desperate, "Do you not see she is the reason for all our suffering? She is—" But he stopped, his words cut short as the girl's flames flickered once more, not in rage but in sorrow. The crimson glow wrapped around her hands, soft and steady. She raised them slowly, not as a weapon, but as light. The fire illuminated her face, not monstrous but young, tired, and yearning. Her voice cracked, but it carried through the clearing. "I never wanted to hurt you." Silence followed. The hunters stared, their fear breaking under the weight of her truth. The elder's face faltered, his anger crumbling into uncertainty. One by one, the hunters lowered, their spears completely. Some even bowed their heads, ashamed of the years they had spent hating her. Daniel placed his hand on her shoulder again, steady and warm. His voice was soft. "Not monster, never monster." She closed her eyes, the tears finally falling. For the first time, she felt the chains of her curse beginning to break. The council would not accept it so easily. The elders would resist, clinging to their fear. But tonight, the first stone of the wall between her and her people had cracked. And through that crack, light began to pour. The girl looked at Daniel, his face pale but his eyes unwavering. She whispered softly, so only he could hear, "You gave me this." He shook his head, pointing to her chest. The meaning was clear. The strength had always been hers. He had only helped her see it. The night passed slowly, the hunters dispersing in silence. Some glanced at her with new respect, others with confusion, but none called her a monster as they left. The clearing grew quiet again, the flames fading to embers. The girl sat beside Daniel, the weight of the night heavy on her shoulders, but for the first time she felt something new deep inside her. Hope. The twin suns rose slowly above the forest, painting the world in soft gold. The clearing where the battle had been fought was silent now, filled only with the smell of smoke and the whispers of wind. The alien child sat beside Daniel, her eyes red, not from fire, but from tears. She had survived the night. She had fought. She had saved lives. But the weight of her past still pressed heavy on her heart. Daniel's wound was bound with strips of cloth, his face pale, yet his eyes remained bright. He looked at her with a faint smile, as if her very presence gave him strength. Every time she tried to speak, the words caught in her throat. For years, no one had listened to her. No one had cared. But now there was someone who saw her. Someone who believed she was more than a curse. The Vayari hunters returned slowly, their steps uncertain. They formed a circle once again, but this time no spears were raised. Their leader stepped forward, his crystal eyes dim with shame. "We were wrong," he said at last. "We called you monster, but last night you saved us all." The words echoed across the clearing, heavy and sharp. The girl lowered her head, unsure if she could trust them. How many times had they spat the same word at her? How many nights had she cried alone? Could a single moment truly wash that away? Daniel pushed himself to his feet. Leaning against the broken tree, he pointed at the girl, then at the hunters, his voice rough but firm. "Not curse, not monster," he said, shaking his head with strength. "Future." The hunters exchanged uncertain glances, but none challenged him. The truth was plain. Without her, they would be ashes in the soil. Even those who still feared her could not deny what they had seen. The elder who had demanded her death remained silent, his face locked in bitterness. But even he did not raise his weapon again. The fire she carried was no longer just hers. It had become their shield, their salvation. The girl felt her heart stir with something new. Not pride, not yet, but the fragile seed of belonging. She looked at Daniel, his rough human face lined with pain and courage. He gave her a small nod, a gesture that spoke louder than any words. "You are not alone." Together they followed the hunters back toward the village. Every step made her chest tighten, memories of rejection clawing at her mind. But she kept walking, Daniel's presence steady beside her. The village gates opened, and, for the first time, she entered not as an outcast, but as one who had saved them. The people gathered, their whispers rising. Some looked at her with awe, others with unease. Mothers pulled their children close. Fathers frowned with uncertainty. But none shouted, none cursed, none turned their backs. It was not acceptance, not yet. But it was no longer pure hatred either. It was the beginning of something fragile. The council of elders stood waiting, their faces hard and cold. One elder spoke. "Her power is dangerous. It must be controlled." Another countered. "Her power is the reason we live." The council argued, their voices sharp. The girl stood silent, her head bowed, afraid that once again they would decide her fate without her voice. But Daniel stepped forward, his weak body swaying. He slammed his hand against his chest and shouted one word. "Choice." The hunters and villagers murmured, the meaning clear. The child should choose her own path, not be chained by fear. The girl lifted her head slowly, her glowing eyes steady. She spoke, her voice trembling but strong. "I am not curse, I am not monster, I am me." Her words rippled through the crowd like fire. For once, no one silenced her. The elders glared, but they did not move. They had lost their power the moment the people saw the truth. The girl's voice had cracked the cage they had built around her. Daniel reached out, resting his hand on her shoulder. His eyes told her everything she needed to hear. The strength was always hers, he had only helped her see it. That night the village did not celebrate, but it also did not shun her. The people lit fires not to drive her away, but to honor survival. The girl sat by the flames, Daniel beside her. For the first time she did not sit on the edge of the light. She sat within it. The moons rose above, glowing softly. The girl looked up, her eyes reflecting both sorrow and hope. She knew the path ahead would not be easy. There would still be fear, still be doubt. but there would also be a chance. Daniel whispered something in his language. She did not understand, but she smiled, because she felt the meaning together as the night grew quiet. The girl whispered to herself, "I was cast out as a monster, but I found kindness, and now I have a beginning." Her red eyes glowed not with fear, but with promise. The forest, the stars, the village, even the universe seemed to hold its breath, for, in that moment, the truth of the monster was broken forever, and in its place stood a child, a protector, and perhaps one day a legend,